Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to our video audience. Always good to have you with us. We are going to talk about division today, and there's lots of it around. I hear that all the time. Oh, this country is so divided. We're divided this way, we're divided that way. You know, after 9/11 happened, there was a period in there of tremendous unity, but then it all fizzled out again. We got back into this whole divisive thing. And if you think about it, the United States has always been quite divided. If you look at this map up there, that's a map from 158 years ago. During the Civil War, the red states are the ones that supported slavery. The blue states were the ones that were against slavery. And the light blue ones were states that didn't leave the Union but still allowed for slavery. So we actually had a civil war. We killed each other over that issue, and it was happening only 158 years ago. I know a fella in St. Louis whose great-grandfather was in the last group of slaves to be auctioned off at the St. Louis courthouse. Now, you know, this gets real when you're sitting across the table drinking coffee with a guy. All of a sudden it became extremely real to me that, yes, this person is here, he's in the United States, his family's been here over 100 years, longer than mine has, and his ancestors were slaves. Interesting. My family were still raising pigs in the Netherlands during that time, but he was there, and his great-grandfather was there and was one of the slaves. And in churches, you see all kinds of disunity these days. The Methodists lost 20% of their congregations this year because of the gay issue, trying to decide whether you can treat gays as equals or not. The Southern Baptists discharged some of their biggest congregations, including Saddleback, which was one of the biggest, or still is one of the biggest congregations in this country, because Saddleback chooses to have ordained women on their staff. The Southern Baptists are opposed to that, so they ask them to leave. They're no longer a Southern Baptist church. The Reformed Church in America, our group, on the issue of human sexuality, we've lost 47% of our membership nationwide just in the last year and a half over that issue by itself. And I've had discussions with folks on that at various synod levels. And my response is always, well, what if you're wrong about this? You know what the answer always is? I'm not wrong. They know, you see. And families even split over it. In my family, you know, I'm quite careful when I'm around Muskegon to not talk politics, because I don't think a pastor should ever tell somebody how to vote or anything like that. But when I'm off duty, when I'm back with my family, I kind of cut loose on it. I've learned I have to tone that way down, because it really does cause the temperature to drop. Can't talk about politics, and I can't talk about religion with my extended family, because they just don't like that. It's so divided. Of course, in my family, we even fight over whether a Chevy or a Toyota is a better car. So, you know, and I drive a Toyota, so you know where that goes. Here's the question for today, is can we disable division? Is there a way that we can disable it? Because, you know, it has negative effects all over the place. Families split apart all the time over it. Neighborhoods end up ignoring each other based on political signs in their yards. Churches have insane arguments and have had them from the beginning of time. I've heard just recently, Michigan would be a great place. We could just get rid of Detroit. You know, maybe we can send it back to Ohio or something. But other than that, Michigan would be great. And you see the red states and the blue states fighting each other. There's the name calling and the dissociation that goes with it. I've heard in this building people say there's just a bunch of idiots in government. Now, the people who say that have never held a public office, and probably never taken a civics or a government class, but they'll say things like that. And comments like this fuel division. They don't disable it. So is there a way to stop this? Well, we're going to look at a Bible passage today from Romans that does talk about how to stop that. Now again, as you go through Romans, it's important to know that Paul wrote this letter, probably from Corinth, to this first generation of Christians living in Rome. And about half of them were from a Jewish background. They observed kosher meals, they observed all the Jewish festivals, things like that. And half of them were from a pagan background. They didn't know anything about the Old Testament laws. They didn't know anything about the God of the Jews. They had their own gods, and a whole bunch of them, a whole closet full of them. And they had no idea about eating kosher or observing certain days off, that sort of thing. Now, the Jews could only offer sacrifices in Jerusalem, which was a long way from Rome. Okay, but they would only offer the sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem. That temple had not been torn down yet. That temple was destroyed in 70 AD by some politician irritated the Caesar, and he leveled the place. But that was before this destruction. So they would only offer their sacrifices in Jerusalem. But the pagans, they could offer sacrifices anywhere. And they did. Hundreds of altars in Rome in that day. Pagans were everywhere. And what they did is they'd sacrifice these animals to the various gods. Well, what do you do with the meat? They would sell it. And some Christians didn't have a problem with buying that meat. You know, myself, if I could get hamburger at half price just because it was sacrificed to Apollo, I wouldn't care, you know. Or prime rib that was sacrificed to Venus. It's $12.50 at Meijer. If I can get it for $6, I'm going to do it. I don't care if it's sacrificed to a fertility goddess. I'm going to take it. Or a brisket that's been sacrificed to Jupiter. I could care less. But the Romans took that stuff very seriously. Now, they had a festival that's been preserved for us because somebody chose to carve it in stone. It's called Suave Taurilia in Latin. And it was supposedly the most sacred rite of Roman religion at the time the letter to the Romans was written. And what they did with this Suave Taurilia is they sacrificed a bull and a pig and a sheep to the god Mars. You know, Mars was the warrior god and all that sort of thing. So they would do these sacrifices in the temple of Mars several times a day, and they had all this meat to get rid of. So they sold it, and the early Christians would buy it. This was deeply offensive to the Jewish party in the church. They said, no, you can't buy this stuff. We only eat kosher, and we're not going to eat the pig. No barbecued pork, no BLTs for us. We are going to just have kosher beef. Well, it's to this that Paul is writing this from chapter 14 of Romans. And here it goes. Welcome with open arms, fellow believers who don't see things the way you do. And don't jump all over them every time they do or say something you don't agree with. Sounds like it was written yesterday, doesn't it? Even when it seems that they are strong on opinions but weak in the faith department. Remember, they have their own history to deal with, so treat them gently. Wow, welcome those who disagree with you. I think we're trying to do that. You know, I ran into this little meme thingy online this week. It says, just because I disagree with you does not mean I hate you. We need to relearn that in our society. But what Paul is essentially saying here is don't jump all over people just because they disagree with you. You know, we all have our own history to deal with, and that's just a fact. Now, this is from the Message. It's a paraphrase. but I really like the way he words this, so we're using it today. This is the next verse in there. So here we go. Paul saying, so mind your own business. Yep, that's in the Bible. Mind your own business. You've got your hands full just taking care of your own life before God. Oh, isn't that an interesting little statement there? In other words, if you don't like what someone else is doing, just don't join in. Mind your own business. We used to have potlucks in my home church. That was a big church. There were 60 kids in my grade, just to give you an idea of how big it was. We'd have these potlucks, and my mom's famous dish for that was a pork casserole. I can't eat pork casserole to this day. But she made it. People liked it. But if you don't like it, take something else. It was just that simple. I found that Dutch people can make tacos, and so I ate tacos at those things usually. But if you don't like the pork casserole, you don't have to eat it. It's fine. Just mind your own business, as Paul says. You've got your hands full with your own life. Stop trying to regulate someone else's. And he goes on. Forget about deciding what's right for each other. Here's what you need to be concerned about, that you don't get in the way of someone else, making life more difficult than it already is. I'm convinced, Jesus convinced me, that everything as it is in itself is holy. We, of course, by the way we treat it or talk about it, can contaminate it. Of course, Paul's talking in the context of food sacrificed to idols here, but it applies to every situation. It's a universal principle. Forget about deciding what's right for each other. Trust people to make their own moral decisions. I had a revelation about 20 years ago. Really changed the way I do ministry. I figured out something. I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And I can't make decisions for someone else. I don't have all the data, and even if I did, I'd still make the wrong decision. So I had to stop that. Essentially, what Paul is saying here is don't contaminate other people's lifestyles with your criticism. Just don't do that. He goes on with this. So let's agree to use all our energy in getting along with each other. Help others with encouraging words. Don't drag them down by finding fault. What he's saying here is that getting along is a priority. Getting along is more important than getting your way. I heard a psychologist say years ago, you can't be right and happy at the same time. Obviously, he was married. But you can't. That's been a truth that has stuck with me. You can't be right and happy at the same time. Now, he was saying that in the context of marriage counseling, but it works for all relationships. Instead, help with encouraging words. Don't drag them down by finding fault. And he goes on. Cultivate your own relationship with God, but don't impose it on others. You're fortunate if your behavior and your belief are coherent. But if you're not sure, if you notice that you're acting in ways inconsistent with what you believe, some days trying to impose your opinions on others, other days trying to please them, then you know that you're out of line. If the way you live isn't consistent with what you believe, then it's wrong. So in other words, you deal with you. And don't put your rules on everyone else. As Paul, my summary of this is, mind your own business, and you'll be all right. So on the back of your bulletins, there's this 5 blanks. I'm going to invite you to turn to that. Those of you who are watching this on video, this would be a good time to get a pencil and a piece of paper, because I'm going to ask you to do something with this afterwards. So 5 things you can do to help disable division that I'm taking from this passage. The first one is this: you welcome those who disagree with you. That's pretty simple. Someone disagrees with you on different things, you welcome them. You know, and it's over pretty major things. Not like, well, should we go to Culver's or should we go to Cracker Barrel, you know? It's bigger deals than that. I'd pick Cracker Barrel. But, you know, those are the things that you think, welcome those who disagree with you. It's okay. Second one, if you don't like what someone else is doing, just don't join in. You don't have to join in on what they're doing, just don't do it. And then number 3, forget about deciding what is right for each other. Because we can't do that. We don't know. And then there's number 4, make getting along a priority. Very important thing to remember. And then number 5.
Yeah, I'm still writing number 3.
You're still writing number 3? Where'd you go to school? All right.
What was number 3 again?
Number 3, forget about deciding what's right for each other. And number 4 is make getting along a priority. I guess I am going kind of fast here, aren't I? All this stuff will be in the video, Mark, so we'll be in good shape. You can review it. Here's number 5. Are you ready for number 5? Don't impose your beliefs and rules on others. Okay? Now, I want you to write this down. And then what I'd like you to do is pass this to your spouse or your significant other and ask them to circle the ones that you need to work on. And they will do it. And I am available for marriage counseling. But here's the thing, is that you need to do that because it is that significant for all of us. You know, have someone circle what you're not doing, where you need to work on. It might not change you, but it will give you something to think about. See, too often we want to impose rules on others that we don't intend to keep for ourselves. Now, I have, over the years, tried to maintain a friendship with law enforcement officers. And I certainly did that more when I had the smaller churches. I had more time. But there's this old boy in my last church in Alexander, Iowa, where he was a night shift deputy sheriff. Good guy, I trust him with anything, but he wasn't the safest driver. And he would ask me to ride along with him sometimes at night just to help him stay awake. So I did. You know, he was a good guy. We would give out speeding tickets to semis, things like that. It was just fun to ride along, you know. He let me flick the switch to turn his little lights on. I was having fun, you know. And we did that several evenings, and it was kind of fun. I got to be friends with him, and one time we were going to an event together in his private car. And he was going 90 miles an hour on these rural roads. They were paved at least, but 90 miles an hour. And I was scared because he was talking to me the whole time and he didn't always stay in the lane. I thought, whoa. And it was a Chevy, you know, so no comment. Yeah, probably pretty safe. So here's the thing. I just said to him, you know, you're going kind of fast here, aren't you? And he goes, well, yeah, the speed limit, that's just for bad drivers. Those of us who know how to drive, we can go 20, 30 miles over the speed limit. It doesn't hurt anything. And I thought, well, I'll drive myself next time. But to me, that's not a big deal what this cop was doing. But we do that as churches. We do that as families, where we want to impose rules on other people that we have no intention of keeping ourselves. And that, I believe, is what Paul is saying here we have to stop. The church's job, my job, is to teach you the Bible. You know, I want you to come in here every Sunday and learn something new. And, you know, once you get past 60, you'll learn something new every day anyway. But it does happen. I want you to learn something new, like the Roman sacrifices, things like that. I want to teach you the Bible, and then I want you to apply it. And the church must not criticize you for how you apply it. Pastors and churches need to trust people to make their own moral decisions, because we all make wrong ones from time to time. We need to do that and not get on people's cases for applying the scriptures if they apply them in a different way than we do. So, here's the question. Can we disable disagreement? No, I don't think we can. I don't think that's possible, because we can't control other people. If I could control other people, I'd fill this place up every Sunday just to make me feel good, of course. You see, we can't control other people. And you have to be aware, I'm sure you all are, that there's an entire industry out there whose goal is to keep you upset. That is the media industry. They want to keep you upset. They want to keep you fired up because they got drugs to sell you on those long commercials all the time. So they want to keep you watching. Don't fall for that. Media wants to keep you hyped up. And while we can't control anything, we can influence. Look again at verse 19. So let's agree to use all our energy in getting along with each other. Help others with encouraging words. Don't drag them down by finding fault. We can disable a whole lot of division in our own lives just by following that. And that's a start. So let's pray together, shall we? Lord, we have contributed to the division both in our country and in our state, our neighborhoods, and in our church. We don't want to do that. So give us the courage to disable as much division as we can. We know you've called us to do that. Help us and bless us in that way. Amen. All right, and to our video audience, as always, thanks so much for tuning in.